welcome back to my channel. I am going to be spending this little video showing you how I edit my photos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and walk you through the process that I go through. So first, I make sure that my photograph is uploaded. I connect my USB cards or USB. I connect my memory cards through my USB and upload them, load them onto my computer, and then I start them through Lightroom. So once I get to Lightroom, I'm going to show you how I put everything together. All right, so I have one of the images from the shoot. This one is a cell phone image, but I'm going to edit it the same way that I would any of the other ones. Once it is all loaded in, I click on develop and it allows me to start making changes to the photograph. So I have a few different presets over here. This is where I keep all of them. Some of my favorite ones are Katie Mary's. I have Noble presets as well. I also have Studio McGee and Boxwood Avenues presets. I also have the archetype ones as well. But right now or lately, I have been really trying to test out some different looks and feels. So I am going to show you the Studio McGee preset. So what I do is I start off by just kind of looking through how the photograph takes to the preset. Whenever you are doing this, yes, again, there are presets where there's maybe only one that you can look through, but when there's multiple options, each photograph takes differently. So depending on the lighting, all of that kind of stuff of when you were photographing the image, you want to make sure that you are carrying the same look and keeping your images cohesive. So that's why I go through and look through each of them and see how they take. Okay, so for this one, I think I am going to choose, I'm going to go through and I'm going to choose clean. That feels the most like all of the other ones. I'm going to take that off to the side. So what I do is then I start editing. I see some slanted lines, so I want to make sure that it's straight. I see some shadows up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little rectangle, drag this down and bring up the exposure. So then everything is the same. I see some shadows in here as well. So I just get this brush tool, make a little mark, and I bring up the shadows. I notice that it's a little bit blue. The image is a little bit blue for my liking, so I'm going to bump it up a little bit. I still feel like it's a little crooked, so I'm going to come in and adjust that as well. And then I can start playing around with things. It's might be a little bit green. Going to try and bring up the pink tones, maybe bring the warmth down a little bit. But basically, these are the main pieces that I work with when I am editing. So we've got the color, we have exposure, shadows, whites, highlights, all of that kind of stuff. This kind of helps with if there's blurry pieces. And then this is another way to edit your shadows and the colors. So for example, you can see how it's changing. And then down here, this is if, for example, a lot of times with different types of woods, you can get a really strong orange tint, or maybe in the summer, you have a lot of leaves and there's a lot of green. What I do is I then come in and take the orange tint down a little bit and then bring up the hue. So it sucks that orange out a little bit. And when you bring up the hue, it helps it still look a little bit more, keeps life in it. Whereas sometimes when you just take out the saturation, a picture, especially when it comes to skin tones, it can kind of drain them. Whereas bringing the hue up helps keep that in there. So once I feel like the image is edited the way that I want, I'm going to export it. And then what I'm going to do is as it's exporting, I I let it do its thing. But once it's done, I then take that image and I move it into Photoshop. So if there's any, wrinkles or anything like that that I want to get rid of, this is where I do the touch ups. Now, I will say there are some touch ups that I can do on Lightroom, but if they're too big or maybe they're a little intricate, then I cannot do them. And so I switch over to Photoshop. So now I have the image pulled up in Photoshop. And I'm just going to go through and look through as many imperfections as I can get rid of. Now, I work with a few tools mainly on here as well. So I work with this patch tool, which I'm going to show you right here, where I see a wrinkle right here. I'm going to kind of pull it away. Now, I don't want to do this too much because I also don't want to fully take away from the way something looks, but it can be really helpful when you look at an image, you look for what's really distracting you and you want to get rid of that. So for example, this one is very distracting to me. Another thing I could do is I could crop the image over here, make it smaller, and then I don't have to worry about doing these. But the ideal is that you work through all of the things before you take the picture so you have less work on the back end. But I did this purposefully in order to be able to show you how this works. So that's one of my main tools is this patch tool right over here. The next one is a stamp tool. So what it does is, for example, this is something that I corrected, but you can tell it doesn't quite look the same as the fabric around it. So what I'm going to do is I click Option and I select, and then I'm going to drag it over. So I selected what that fabric looks like and I pull it over, and now it looks like all the other fabric that's surrounding it. So that's another one of my main tools. And then once I'm done with editing it, I just click my Command S and I save it, and it is all good to go. So that is how I edit an image on a daily basis. Some need a little bit more tweaking than others, but again, you want to try before taking the pictures to clear up as much as possible that will distract or take away from the image, and then go in and Photoshop what would be left over. And then there's times where you don't have control over things. So for example, if you're editing weddings, maybe a venue has an exit sign that ends up in a lot of the background of your images. You have no control over that. You can't have them move the exit sign. So there are times when you just can't get around it. But there are times, especially when it comes to product photography or food photography, where you can make it a little less harder on you when it comes to editing your photos.